There may come a time in your life where you should probably retire. And for some of you, that time may even be right now. So whether that time is today or that time is yet to come, today we're going to be talking about 5 reasons that you should consider retiring. This is another episode of Ready for Retirement. I'm your host, James Cannell, and I'm here to teach you how to get the most out of life with your money. And now, on to the episode. So today's episode is going to be talking about retirement and how do you know it's time to retire. Now, before we jump in, I want to make sure that you don't think I'm anti-work. I want to get that out of the way right now. I love work. I know a lot of people who love work, and work doesn't even seem like a burden. Work seems more like something that you get to do. It's a creative outlet. It's something that's really enjoyable and adds to your quality of life. Me personally, I have several more years to go, but a traditional retirement, it's not even something that I'm really attracted to because I have something that I love doing. However, I know not everyone is so fortunate. I know most people, or a lot of people at least, don't wake up excited to go to work and do what they do for a living. So there is a lot of nuance to this conversation. This should not be taken as a blanket statement that everyone should retire by a specific age and go hit the golf course and start traveling. That's not at all what I want this to imply. However, we all do hit a time, or most of us at least hit a time, where it starts to cost us more to keep working than it does to retire. So how do you know when that time might be? Well, in today's episode, I'm going to share with you the 5 reasons it might be time for you to retire so you can see how this applies to your situation. Before we jump in, though, going to highlight the review of the week. This review comes from username Mouse010. It says, 5-star review, love this podcast, so informative. I am retiring relatively soon and feel so much better informed after listening to the show. Highly recommend. Thank you very much for that review. Thank you to all of you who are leaving reviews. More and more people finding this podcast every single month and get great feedback from many of you who say how impactful the podcast has been. So thank you for those of you who are listening. Extra thank you for those of you who are leaving reviews. Really want as many people as possible to be impacted by this. So let's jump in. There's 5 things that I want to talk about today as you start to consider retirement. Because it's easy to look at work and say, okay, it's 1 more year of income, it's 1 more year of saving, it's 1 more year of investing and compound growth, maybe it's 1 more year of additional Social Security benefits growing. Lots of benefits there. However, too often we don't look at the downsides to continuing to work. And again, this is very nuanced because I don't want anyone to go out and retire too soon. They're going to have a bad time. It's not going to feel very good when you can't afford to do the things that you want to do or you're constantly worrying about running out of money. However, for a lot of people, there does come a time when you should retire. You're past that point, and that's what I want to talk about today. So number 1, the first reason it might be time to retire now is when you start to realize that time is the only non-renewable currency. So what do I mean by that? Well, there's always the potential to make more money, whether that's more income or more growth on investments or maximizing Social Security. That's something you can always do. Now, it might be difficult, but it's always possible. It is not possible to get more time. None of us have any idea how long we have on this earth. And so when you look at time as this thing that you're always going to have, the temptation is just to work and work and work and work and tell yourself you'll enjoy your time later. Now, a lot of times that's just a form of procrastination. It's ourselves justifying to ourselves continuing to work, but the reality is we just don't know what we would do in retirement. We don't know what a fulfilling life would look like. But when you start to realize you can't get time back, and as simple of a statement as that sounds, it's something that we all too easily glance right over. It's uncomfortable to think about our mortality, to think about how much time we have left. And so instead of doing that and thinking about what does a great retirement look like, we bury ourselves in more work and keep working well past we should. So as you start looking at this, we have to really realize that time is the one thing we can never get back, and none of us know how long that we have. Now, I've worked with people who retired, and they felt like they had all the time in the world. They prepared, they built up their portfolio, and they retired. And within a couple of years, or even a couple of months, in a couple of instances, they fell ill and passed away. And now, it's extremely sad to say, but in those last days, how many of them do you think were thinking about their portfolio size, or their most recent bonus, or what they did with their savings account and their Roth conversion strategy? Now, granted, all those things are important, but when placed in proper context, they pale in comparison to making sure that we're getting the most life that we can possibly get, getting the most out of life, I should say, that we can possibly get. So the older that we get, the less valuable money becomes because the more valuable time becomes. So you do have to strike that balance, as I mentioned. You need to work long enough to ensure that you have the financial capacity to enjoy your time in retirement, But at some point, you have to get off the hamster wheel of trading time for money, and you have to start living. Again, I'm almost making the assumption here that work isn't something you love doing. If work is something that you love doing, and you're not just lying to yourself when you tell yourself that you love working, well, there's not really a huge reason to retire or stop doing that unless it's holding you back from things that are even more important. Time with family, time with friends, time pursuing those other things that are also a priority in your life. So the first reason it might be time to retire now is that time is the only non-renewable currency. The second reason where it might be time for you to consider retiring now is to improve your health. Now, think about this for a second. Close your eyes. Think about the average person you know that's about to retire. What kind of health is that person in? What kind of shape is that person in? Just imagine. What comes to mind first? Oftentimes, that person isn't in the greatest health. Now, I know this isn't always, but many times, by the time that you get to retirement age, you've been grinding for 40 years. You've raised families. You've paid off mortgages. You've worked overtime. You've been giving all that you have to your workplace, that you haven't been taking proper care of yourself. So as you look at that, by the time the average person gets to retirement, they're feeling pretty burned out. Now, when you feel pretty burned out, when you've given that many years, when you've sacrificed that much of your time and your energy and your effort, this can cause a tremendous amount of stress, and stress can cause all kinds of negative health outcomes. It can lead to depression, to anxiety, to heart disease, to high blood pressure, to stroke. So if not managed well, this stress can quite literally take years off your life. And if we go back to point number one of time being the only non-renewable currency, let's not give away any of that time that we don't need to give away through bad health decisions. And again, it can be very difficult to manage health in the midst of everything that you're doing as you're trying to save and grind and prepare for retirement. So if that's where you are, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? And again, I recognize easier said than done. How do you balance the financial side and the personal side? It can be very challenging, but we at least have to be mindful of the potential health impact that work is having on us if work is causing a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety and other negative characteristics. So one of the best things about retiring for some people is they say that they finally have the time to focus on their health. Many people feel the best they've felt in years when they can reduce the stress, eat better, take care of themselves better. So this isn't just a given. You don't just retire and all of a sudden your health miraculously gets better. But if your days are filled with your commute and your work and your overtime and all the things that you're trying to do, it can be difficult to also prioritize health. If you are retired and you're in a financial position to do so, you're in a better spot to be more intentional with that, to eat better, to live better, to prolong your life and to have an enjoyable or more enjoyable retirement. The third reason it might be time to retire now is it allows you to spend more time with family and friends. So this sounds obvious, but when you think about it, let's see where your time actually goes. So if you're working, let's say 40 to 50 hours per week, that's a lot of your waking hours that you're working. Now maybe you're spending another few hours per week commuting if you're still driving to an office. And maybe you spend a few more hours a week running errands or taking care of the home or managing bills. When you start to add up all those hours and add in how many hours you need for basic things like sleep or eating, well, how much time is actually left for friends and for family? And not just how much time is left, but how much quality time is actually left. When we factor in, or when we start to fully understand that the quality of our relationships is one of the biggest factors that determines the quality of your life, ask yourself, what is the quality of those relationships? Versus, what could the quality of those relationships be if you had more time available? If you could spend more time being present with family? If you could spend more time doing things with friends? So when you start to think about that, again, I go back to what I said at the very beginning, that there's a cost to retiring too early, but there's also a cost to retiring too late. What is that cost? Well, it's the opportunity cost of the time that you'll have with your family, with your friends, with the people that are meaningful to you. So as you're looking at your work, is it detracting from what you otherwise could be doing with important people in your life? I recognize it's not always that way. Some people have a tremendous balance between work and their personal lives. Many people, some of their best friends are actually at work. So by working, they're actually continuing in a way to get that win-win scenario where they're getting both that social interaction as well as work and the income and benefits that come from it. But recognize that one of the greatest benefits of retirement is the ability to have your time back. You then get to be intentional about how do you spend that time. And hopefully that time and part of that intentionality is spending more time with friends and with family if that's what's most important to you. The fourth reason it may be time to retire now, and this is a big one, is your best years are limited. So let's walk through what I mean by this. Let's assume that you do have a 30-year retirement. Well, are all 30 years created equal? If you're 62 years old today and you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt it was somehow guaranteed to you you're going to live to 92, you might look at that and say, gosh, I got 30 more years. That's a good amount of time. You know what? Let's make the most of it. Instead of actually retiring at 62, what if I worked all the way until 70 to max out my Social Security, to build up my 401k a little bit more? You look at it and say, sure, I've given up a few years, but I still have 22 years of retirement left. Well, do you really? You have 30 years of lifespan, but what's your actual health span? So age 62 to 65 might be your best health. Then maybe 66 to 70 is still pretty good, but it's slightly worse than it was from 62 to 65. And then every year, a couple or few years after that, slowly but surely, your health starts to decline. Well, by working from 62 to 70, this example, you're not just giving up part of your retirement, you may be giving up the best years of your retirement by doing that. And once again, at the risk of sounding redundant here, you constantly have to measure the financial impact of retiring early versus the financial and the personal impact of retiring too late. But if you could do it at 62, what are you giving up by continuing to work past that point? Now, I'm just using 62 here as kind of an arbitrary example. For you, it could be 65. For you, it could be 60 or 55. It really does not quite matter. It's more about once you reach financial independence, each year that you continue working, if you don't enjoy working, it's not just one out of many years that you're giving up in your retirement. It may be the best single year of health that you're going to have that you're giving up in your retirement. The best single year of energy you're giving up that you would have throughout your retirement. So don't just think in terms of how many years do I have. Think in terms of how many good years do I have? How many years will I have my health and my energy and the time to do the things I want to do? Oftentimes, those are the years that people are sacrificing when they keep working longer than they should. So the fourth reason, again, is your best years are limited, and you really need to understand that when making the decision of when you're going to retire. Then the fifth reason that it's maybe time to retire now is you're financially ready. Now, this reason kind of is an overarching reason for each of these because you don't want to retire too soon before you are actually financially ready. Yes, there's some downsides to continuing to work, but there's huge downsides to retiring before you're able to actually afford to do so. But this point, as simple as it may seem, is very difficult. Just because you are financially free does not make it necessarily easy to retire. I talk to so many people who say, you know what, I know I'm ready. I know the numbers make sense. I know the Monte Carlo analysis is fine. I know that I'm projected to be able to meet all my needs and then some, but it's still very difficult to work. And what the reason for that is we just become byproducts of the habits that we've developed over our lifetimes. And even if you don't enjoy work, you've been working for a very long time. And it's not easy just to step away from this thing that we can't even remember a time where we weren't doing it. We can't remember when we weren't working. It's maybe been 40 plus years until you haven't been clocking in and going into the office every single day. So for those of you who are financially ready to retire and you don't necessarily love work, and you've probably talked a bunch about wanting to do something different, just recognize that it's totally natural that it still may be difficult to do that. You've been doing this for 30, 35, 40, 45 plus years. It's very difficult just to step away. Now, it's one thing to be mindful of this and to work through it, and it's another thing to fall into the trap of just continuing to work for the sake of working. Continuing to work for the sake of working is really just a form of procrastination. What it really means is we're putting off actually doing the difficult thing. The difficult thing is finding out who we want to be when we grow up. What do we want retirement to look like? How do we reinvent ourselves after we no longer have 40, 50, 60 hours a week that we have to spend committed to our workplace? That can be very difficult. That can be very scary. And as much as you may dislike work, it's sometimes easier just to fall into the trap of saying, you know what, at least this is the evil I know. At least this is something I know and understand and know what to expect. The far harder thing is to work through the process of understanding who do I want to become? What is it that I want to do? Where do I actually want my meaning to come from? But doing so takes some introspection, takes some reflection, and it can be a difficult process to work through. However, if you don't enjoy work, and if you're financially free to the point that you don't need work to generate an income anymore, it is crucial that you start working through this, because if you don't, you're going to look back one day and there's going to be this sense of regret. Of you wish you had started this process sooner. You wish you had started this process of, as silly as it might sound, self-discovery sooner, so that you can not just retire from work, but also have something amazing to retire to. So that is an important thing to keep in mind. And again, that fifth reason is kind of an overarching reason for all the previous points that I made about how do you know when it's time to retire. So again, just in summary, number one, the first reason it might be time to retire is when you start to realize that time is the only non-renewable currency. Number two is retirement may be the best way to improve your health. Number three, you'll have more time to spend with friends and family. And again, the friends and family, the quality of our relationships is one of the biggest factors that determines the quality of your life. So having that time can be very important. Number four, even if you have a long lifespan, your health span may be limited. So your best years are limited and we don't want to waste those doing something we don't want to be doing. And then number five, and again, this kind of transcends everything else, you're financially ready. So great things right there to keep in mind. And one more time, I don't want to say that work is bad. Work is wonderful if it's something you enjoy. If it's a creative outlet, if it's beneficial to you and to others, then keep on doing it. As long as it's not interfering with the other priorities you have, work can be something you do, quite frankly, until you can't do it anymore, until the day that you die. However, if it ever stops being that, then considering these 5 questions or these 5 reasons we went through today could be the thing that's needed to push you into that next phase of life. So I hope this was helpful. I know that today wasn't a super financial focused episode, but the non-financial side of retirement is just as important. So I hope that was helpful for all of you. As always, I appreciate you spending 20 minutes or so of your day with me as we go through this episode. Hope to see you again soon, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Ready for Retirement podcast. If you're looking to work with a financial advisor that cares deeply about helping you get the most out of life with your money, head over to our website at rootfinancialpartners.com and click Start Here. One of our advisors would love the opportunity to speak with you. You can also find the show notes for today's episode on our website, along with other great content that will help you to create a wonderful retirement. And finally, if you have a question that you'd like for me to answer in a future episode, then from our website, click on the Learn tab. Scroll down just a bit on that page and then click Submit a Question to submit a question that I will answer in a future episode. Again, that can all be found at rootfinancialpartners.com. Thanks as always for listening, and I'll see you next time. Hey everyone, it's me again for the disclaimer. Please be smart about this. Before doing anything, please be sure to consult with your tax planner or financial planner. Nothing in this podcast should be construed as investment, tax, legal, or other financial advice. It is for informational purposes only.